The photographer had been shooting for 40 minutes, and in every one of those minutes, my brother's daughter was holding up the train of my dead mother's wedding dress with both fists. I came around the side of the house and stopped at the gate. I go there every other Sunday. Somebody has to run the water and check the sump pump because the estate hasn't closed and the house sits there full of a dead woman's furniture waiting for 3 signatures. That is the only reason. I was standing at my own mother's gate like a stranger, watching my sister get married on the front steps 7 weeks before the wedding. She had the dress on, my mother's, taken in at the ribs so it would close, and pinned at the shoulder where it wouldn't. 11 relatives were out on the lawn with drinks. My aunt was holding the veil box. And 4 feet behind my sister, in a red winter coat in August, was a 7-year-old who has not spoken a word since we buried her grandmother 14 months ago, holding fabric off the grass because someone told her to keep it from wrinkling. Chin down, now look at her like she's yours, the photographer said. She is mine, my sister said and laughed, and the lawn laughed with her. Then she saw me at the gate. She didn't lower her voice. That is the part I want you to have. There were 11 people on that lawn, and she picked the volume on purpose. Oh, good. Come tell me it's rotting in my closet now. Brides beat hoarders. She shook the skirt out so it caught the light. You're 30 years old with a closet full of a dead woman's clothes and nobody to wear them for. Mom knew that. That's why she left it where it would sit. She turned back to the camera and put her hand out flat, backward, without looking. Sweetheart, train, up. And the child lifted it, both fists, higher. I counted to 4 with my thumbnail pressed into the gate latch until it left a mark, and I'll tell you exactly why I didn't cross that lawn. If I made that a scene in front of 11 relatives, the story by Tuesday would be that I ruined my sister's engagement pictures, and the person who would eat that story every day at breakfast was the child holding the train. She had already stood there 40 minutes. She was not going to stand there because of me, too. So I waited at the gate until they broke for water, and I walked up to the photographer and asked for his card. I'd like the full gallery, I said. Every frame, unedited, with the timestamps, including the ones nobody was posing for. He looked past me at my sister, and then he took my $40 because he's a man with a Sunday rate and a truck payment. He wrote the receipt on the back of a business card. Then, still writing, in the pleasant voice people use for small talk, he said, "You're the aunt, right? So you'd know. She told me this shoot's a 2-for-1. Engagement pictures and adoption pictures, same afternoon. Said the adoption's finalized in September, and she wanted the kid in the good coat." He clicked his pen. "Which coat is the good one? Because she's been in the red one all day." I did not answer him. I put the card in my back pocket, and I walked to my car, and I sat in it until they were finished. Nothing about a dress explains that sentence. Nothing about a wedding explains it either. My sister has until the 3rd of September, the deadline she set herself, 2 days before the dress goes to a buyer in St. Louis, to enjoy being the woman in my mother's dress. I'm not going to take it off her. What I want is smaller than a dress. It's older than this argument by 4 years. And right now it is sitting in a building where my sister badges through the back door every morning at 10 to 8, which means I have to get my hands on it before she finds out I'm looking. My name is Upton Sheridan. I'm 30, I teach special education, and I have spent 4 years being the villain in a story I was never once asked about. If that's a seat you've ever sat in, stay with me to the end of this one. And if you think I should have crossed that lawn, say so in the comments, because I still don't know. 3 days later, that dress came back to my door in a garment bag, grass on the hem, tape under the netting. And her fiancé stood on my porch and told me to open it before she asked for it back. Monday morning, I went to work, because the district starts a week before the children do, and my room had 31 folders in it and no chairs. I was cutting name tags in the workroom when a woman from the front office came through with a cart complaining about August. August is when the phones ring. All summer, the attendance system runs on its own and spits out letters, and parents don't open their mail in July, so they open it the week before school and call the building screaming at whoever picks up. 6 unexcused and it generates, she said. Nobody types those. The system types those, and it goes to whoever's on the guardianship line, not the parent line, and then they call me like I wrote it by hand. She kept talking, I kept cutting. I want to be exact, because it matters later. I did not look at a file. I have never looked at that child's file. What I knew that Monday was what anybody in that workroom knew. The machine counts to 6, and when it hits 6, it prints a letter, and the letter goes out with a state seal in the corner. I didn't mail it. She earned it in June. Here's the part of my family you need in order to follow the rest. My mother died 14 months ago, and her estate is still open, and it is still open because it needs 3 signatures. Mine, my sister's, and my sister's again. A second time, in a second capacity, because our brother died before our mother did, and his share passes to his daughter, and my sister holds that child's money as conservator. So my sister signs twice. She has 2 of the 3 pens. And for 14 months, she has not picked up either one. And every other Sunday I drive out and run the water in a dead woman's kitchen. Somewhere in a pile of mail my sister had not opened since June, there was an envelope with the state seal in the window and her own name typed under it. Tuesday night was enrollment. Every teacher in the building works it. Folding tables under the basketball hoop, a laminator that jams, and 200 parents in a gym that smells like floor wax and rain. My sister was not there. She was at a fitting, and I know that because my aunt was working the PTA table by the door and announced it to a table of women in the voice you use for good news. They post the class lists on the tile by the water fountain. 2nd grade, alphabetical, printed small. I read that list the way you read a list when you are pretending to read a different list. My brother's daughter was on it. She was not on it under my brother's name. Somebody had put her down under my sister's fiancé's last name, and beside it, in the registrar's handwriting, was one word in parentheses: pending. Not enrolled, pending. A name held open like a seat at a table, waiting for a court date to make it true. The photographer had told me September. The registrar's note told me somebody had already started spelling it that way on paper, and a school will let a name sit pending for exactly as long as the county lets it, and then the county closes the file and the name is the name, and 4 years of a woman standing at a gate become a woman with no standing at all. I stood under a basketball hoop with a laminator jamming behind me and did the arithmetic that ends this part of my life. I stopped waiting for my mother's house to close and started counting days. Wednesday he came to the porch. My sister's fiancé is 34 and teaches high school 2 districts over, and he had the garment bag over his forearm like a waiter. He had taken the dress in to have the shoulder let out, because it had been pinned all Sunday and the pin showed in every frame. The seamstress had refused the job. He repeated her line twice like it was funny. She wouldn't cut the lining. She said there's something stitched in there, and she's not opening somebody's mother's dress on a Wednesday. He held it out. I didn't take it. Look, just hold it a few weeks. It has to go to the buyer on the 5th of September anyway, and she's not going to want it sitting at our place with the wedding stuff. He shifted his feet. Check the inside pocket, all right? Before she asks for it back. Then he did the thing men like him do, which is confess in the middle of a sentence about something else. It's been a long summer for everybody. That kid fell asleep sitting up in the bridal shop back in May and nobody woke her for 2 hours, and I said to myself then, somebody's got to. I is a teacher. In this state, a teacher is a mandated reporter. He had said to himself in May, and it was August. The zipper on the garment bag caught halfway down on the netting and he yanked it, and whatever the end of that sentence was, neither of us ever heard it. I carried the bag into the garage and put it on the workbench under the light, and I did not open it. 4 years ago, I had the truth and no paper. I had my word against my sister's word in a kitchen, and my word lost so completely that people I have known my whole life still say, after everything to me in a certain tone. If I tore that lining open on a workbench at 9 at night with nobody watching, whatever came out of it would be a thing I said I found. So I photographed the bag sealed, all 4 sides, with the tape and the grass on the hem and the clock on the garage wall in the frame. I wrote the time on a legal pad. I put the bag in my trunk and locked the car in my own driveway. Then I called a family lawyer's office and left a message on the after-hours line, and I kept it to 2 sentences, because I have learned that the more you explain, the less anyone does. I have a sealed item I don't want to open without a witness, and I'd like the first appointment you have. Also, I need to know how fast the clerk's office can give me a stamped copy of something. Thursday, 8:40 in the morning, a strip mall office with a window unit running. She's maybe 40, family practice, bills by the hour, and tells you so before you sit down. She brought her paralegal in as a second set of eyes, put the bag on a glass-top table, and opened the lining herself with a seam ripper, 4 stitches at a time. There was a pocket in the lining, not a designer's pocket. A pocket somebody had made, by hand, out of the seam allowance, with the same small stitch my mother used on hems for 30 years. 2 pieces of paper. The first was a single sheet in my mother's handwriting, shaky in the downstrokes, dated the 12th of March, 2025, with a notary's stamp at the bottom, and a signature line she had filled in slowly enough that the ink pooled. It nominates a guardian for my brother's daughter in the event of her own death. It nominates me. It had never been filed anywhere. It had never been mailed. It had been sewn into the lining of a wedding dress and hung in a closet in a house I water every other Sunday. The second paper was folded twice and tucked inside the first. It was a photocopy, and the copy was old enough that the toner had gone gray at the fold. Renunciation of the right to serve as guardian. Dated the 20th of June, 2022, 10 weeks after we buried my brother. Signed by me. I have never signed that document. I have never seen that document. I did not know that document existed until a paralegal in a strip mall laid it on a glass table. We photographed both sheets, both sides, with a ruler in the frame for scale, because the lawyer said you always shoot the back, and nobody ever knows why until they do. The paralegal set the copy down on the glass, and the desk lamp threw the signature's shadow onto the tabletop underneath, doubled and offset, and in the shadow 1 stroke of my own first name ran the wrong way. 45 minutes later. I was still in that chair and I had stopped being angry, which is a thing that happens to me and which people mistake for calm. The lawyer laid it out flat, the way you'd explain a bill. Understand what this actually did to you. This isn't a lie somebody told at Thanksgiving. This is in a court file. For 4 years, if any judge, any caseworker, any school administrator pulled that guardianship case, the first thing they found was a document saying that the paternal aunt was contacted and voluntarily declined to serve. Everybody in your family has been repeating what's in the file. They think they're remembering. They're reciting. And the nomination? Unfiled. It's a piece of stationery. Your mother's wishes are worth exactly the courthouse's opening hours she never used. I told her what I remembered of 2022 because she asked, and because it takes 90 seconds. April, the funeral home, my sister 24 years old, and the one who went in and identified our brother, because I could not make my legs do it, and she could. I signed the cremation authorization at a table with a box of tissues on it and a pen chained to a clipboard. In June, somebody told me the guardianship was handled. Mom was going to raise her. It's done. Don't make it a thing. My mother was 61 and had raised 3 children and wanted this one. So I stepped back and I sent birthday money, and I got a form letter every August about a school photo package. Where was the notary on this one? The lawyer asked, tapping my mother's sheet. Strip mall, sign and go, next to a tax place. She wrote that down and underlined it twice, and told me that in this state a notary is required to keep a journal, and that a journal is a road to a date that does not run through any piece of paper my family can burn. My mother believed I said no to her son's child. She was in a house with that child for 3 years, believing it. She never once asked me. That afternoon I did not go home. The Callaway County Clerk's office is on the 1st floor. My sister has worked in that building for 10 years. She badges through the back door at 10 to 8 every morning, and everyone at that counter knows her name and her coffee order, and the fact that her sister is difficult. I filled out the request form at the standing desk with the chained pen. Certified copies of the complete guardianship file, every filing, every exhibit, every scanned attachment, with the seal. The woman who took it is 39 and has a picture of a beagle taped to her monitor. She read the case number and then she stopped. Half a second longer than a person stops. Then she asked me if regular copies would be all right, since certified takes longer and costs more. I'd like it certified, I said. The copy has to outlive the paper. She had no idea what I meant, neither did I yet. It took 3 weeks for that sentence to become the whole case. Then she typed, $12. She printed the receipt and stamped the date on it and slid it across, and I folded it into my wallet behind my license, where it stayed for the next 32 days. That same afternoon, my lawyer put a letter in the mail, 1 paragraph, no accusation in it. The wedding dress is undistributed property of an open estate and is not to be sold, altered, or transferred pending distribution. 4 hours, that's how long it took. I was in my car outside the grocery store with the trunk still open when the phone lit up on the passenger seat, and it was my sister, and she had never in 4 years texted me first. Go ahead and read it. Your signature's in there. Then, 10 seconds later, before I could have answered even if I'd wanted to, dress back by Sep 3. The wedding's the 26th, in case you didn't get an invitation. Then the one she'd been saving. You teach other people's broken kids because you couldn't manage one of your own. Everybody knows it. Mom knew it. I want to be honest about the next 90 seconds, because this is the part where you decide whether you like me. I did not cry in that parking lot. I did not type anything. What I felt, sitting there with a bag of frozen peas going soft against my leg, was closer to relief, and I am not proud of it. She thought that forged sheet was a wall behind her. She had just told me, in writing, that she knew what was in it. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder on my phone, and I named the file the way I have named every file since: the date, the time, and nothing else. And I closed the trunk and drove home under the speed limit. Then I opened the Notes app and typed one line, and that line is the whole case. It was 2 words long. The original. The photographer delivered on a Monday 4 days late. 41 frames in the gallery he'd have sold her. And behind those, in a second folder, the raw ones. Every shutter click that afternoon, in order, with the time stamped in the corner of each file. The posed ones are beautiful, I'll give her that. In the good ones, the light comes off that silk the way it did in 1988, when my mother stood on the same steps. I didn't look at those twice. I looked at the 70-odd frames in between. The ones where he was checking his settings, or turning, or catching the group as it drifted apart. Nobody performs in those. In those, my brother's daughter is sitting down on the edge of the second step with her knees up and the train still bunched in her fists, because nobody told her she could put it down. 1:41 in the afternoon, 1:52, 2:04, still holding it, chin on her knees, and the red coat is buttoned to the throat. 2:07, she's asleep, sitting up, back against the porch column, fists closed. In the next frame, 4 seconds later, my aunt is stepping over the train with a tray of plastic cups. I didn't cry, and I want to be accurate about what I did instead. I opened a spreadsheet. I made 3 columns: date, time, where she was, and I started at Sunday the 9th, and I typed until my hands were cold. Somebody had photographed that child for 4 hours and sold the pictures as a family. The next morning was the first day of school, which in my job means the loudest and best day of the year, and I spent the first 10 minutes of my planning period standing in a hallway telling a lawyer no. She had asked the obvious question. I work for the district. Attendance records live on a server I can reach from any machine in the building with my own credentials, and if I opened that record, I would have every absence, every date, every code, in about 30 seconds. I work for the district, I said. That is exactly why I don't touch that file. I'll say it plainly once and then leave it. There is no version of this where I win by becoming a woman who pulled a child's record without a lawful reason. It would end my license and my standing in the case, and the first time my sister's attorney said the word in a courtroom, every true thing I'd found would turn into a story about a bitter aunt with a password. Those records would come by subpoena or they wouldn't come. So I did the part I was allowed to do, at my own table, with public documents. The district publishes its calendar. I laid it next to my 3 columns and started marking which of those hours had been school hours. One of them was the bridal shop in May, and the only reason I have it at all is that a man handed it to me on my porch. One is not a case. One is a reason to make somebody else count. That night my lawyer said the thing that decided the shape of the next month, that a judge would want those dates from the school, not from me, and that there was exactly one way to make a school hand over a record. Ask the court for someone whose job is to ask. The certified packet came on the 20th in a box, and I opened it at 11 at night and was still at the kitchen table at 1 in the morning. Most of a court file is nothing. Notices, certificates of service, a change of address. What I wanted was the guardianship, and it gave me the forged sheet in its native habitat, scanned, indexed, load-bearing, exactly where it had sat for 4 years while people said, after everything to me at funerals. Then I got to the back of the box where the conservatorship lives. When my brother died, there was a settlement. 2 years, a courtroom in another county, and an annuity of $312,000, paid at $1,300 a month, with the balance to her at 18. It is her father's death converted into arithmetic. It sits under the court, and every year the person holding it files an accounting of what came in and what went out, under oath. There were 3 of them in the box, sworn. Her signature at the bottom of each one, the real one, the one that leans. Filed, all 3, and not one of them ever set for hearing. In a county this size, they sit until somebody objects. A vehicle, $19,000, listed as necessary transportation for the minor. Home repairs to the residence where the minor lives, $23,900. A $14,000 deposit, described as a family event venue reservation. And on the most recent one, a single line item, $4,100, children's clothing, $61,000. Nobody leaked that to me. Nobody in that building put a thumb on the scale for the difficult sister. That box was public record. It cost $12. It carried the clerk's certification stamp dated the 20th of August, and the only reason it was on my table was that a week earlier I had stood at a counter and asked for it. At 9, the next morning, my lawyer filed 2 things: a petition to terminate or modify the guardianship, and a motion to intervene in the adoption. Not because I expected to win either one that week. Because until you file something, you are a woman with opinions, and after you file, you are a party. $4,100. She's been in the same coat since Christmas. The witness line took another day to ruin me. Every renunciation like that has a signature line at the bottom for the person who watched you sign it, and I had looked straight past it 4 times because I was busy looking at my own name. I knew the handwriting. He's 49. He practices out of a converted house on Court Street, and he lived 2 doors down from my mother for 11 years. And when I was 16, he drove me to my driver's test because my mother's car wouldn't start and told me to stop apologizing for existing, which was, at the time, the kindest sentence anyone had said to me. He signed under a line that says he witnessed my hand. And underneath, in this corner of the scan, was the electronic stamp the system puts on every document when it's brought into the file. A date, a time, and a user ID. It meant nothing to me. My lawyer asked the court administrator whose it was, and the answer came back off a personnel list, in 1 line. A clerk in that office, not my sister, a woman with a beagle taped to her monitor. My lawyer read it twice and then said the sentence that I have thought about every day since. He didn't forge anything. Whoever forged it forged it. What he did is worse for a lawyer, because it's the thing the whole system is built on. Her paralegal opened the door and said the courthouse was on line 2, and she went, and the end of that sentence took 3 weeks to reach me. On the 24th, we filed a motion, and it is the smallest, politest piece of paper in this entire story. It asked the court for one thing: permission to inspect the original of the renunciation. Not a copy, the paper itself, the one with the pen pressure in it. Attached to it were 5 documents bearing my true signature, every one of them mine, none of them borrowed from anyone. My district employment contract, a vehicle title, my teaching certificate application, a passport application, and a voter registration card. It accused nobody. It named nobody. It said, in effect, I would like to look at a piece of paper in a file that concerns me, and here is what my handwriting actually looks like. I have thought about why I did it that way, instead of standing in the courthouse lobby shouting the word forgery, which is what I wanted to do and what my sister was counting on. If you accuse, they defend. If you ask, they move. And there's the other thing. From the 14th of August to the 3rd of September, I did not speak one word to my sister. Not a text, not a call, not across a parking lot. Everything went lawyer to lawyer, on paper, with a certificate of service. She was screaming into a room I had already left. My aunt called on the 25th and asked me to come by, because there were estate things, and there were no estate things. There were 6 women in that kitchen, a coffee cake, and a stack of wedding invitations sitting on the table with the 26th of September printed on them in silver. My sister had gotten there first. Not to the kitchen, to all of them, one at a time, over the course of 10 days, the way she has always done it. And I have never once been able to catch up to her because she starts before there is anything to start about. My aunt held my hand across the table. She is 71, and she is not cruel, and that is what made it the worst hour of that month. Sweetheart, she said, you signed something, that's all. You were young and you were grieving and you signed something, and nobody's mad at you for it anymore. Nobody's mad at you for it anymore. 4 years I have been the one who wouldn't take her. 4 years of being handled at Christmas. And I had sat in that kitchen through all of it without defending myself once. For the same reason I didn't cross the lawn. Every time I opened my mouth in a room like that one, it turned into a fight. And every fight got repeated in a car on the way home with a child in the back seat who hears everything and cannot answer any of it. I could have my name back, or I could keep her out of it. Those were the 2 things on the menu for 4 years. Then my aunt said the useful part brightly as good news. Anyway, she says the 24th of September ends all of it, permanently. She's already told the church. My sister had just put her own deadline in front of 6 witnesses. My aunt pushed the invitations toward me so I could take one, and the top card slid off the stack and landed face down on the linoleum, and neither of us picked it up. On the 26th, we filed the one that scared me. We asked the court to appoint a guardian ad litem, an independent attorney whose only client is the child, who reports to the judge and to nobody else. We attached the annuity statements. We asked her to be empowered to subpoena the school attendance record. My lawyer made me sit down before she'd file it. Understand what this is. A guardian ad litem is not your ally. She will interview you and she will look at your life, and if she decides you're the problem, she will write that, and the judge will believe her over both of you. Once she's appointed, you don't steer anything. You've just handed the whole thing to a stranger. I know. That is the part where somebody usually asks me if I was sure. I wasn't sure of anything. I was sure of one arithmetic problem. A child had been sitting on a step for 4 hours in a winter coat, and every adult who had seen her that day loved my sister, and I was the only person in the county with a reason to look, and I was also the last person on earth a judge would trust to look. So the looking had to belong to someone with no reason to like me. I signed the request. My lawyer capped her pen and said, "There's one thing you should know about how a guardian ad litem's appointment works before you file this. Tell me after." The 27th and the 28th, she kept her out of school 2 more days. That is days 8 and 9, and I want to be careful here, because I did not know the count then. I knew what I could see. A final fitting on Thursday. Additional photographs on Friday morning, because the first set hadn't included the veil. She posted one of them herself. My brother's daughter, asleep sitting up in a velvet chair with her shoes off, and the caption was a joke about how exhausting it is being the most important person at a wedding, and it got 62 likes, and my aunt commented a heart. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I'd stopped expecting anything from. My sister's fiancé. An address for a bridal shop on Court Street. A time. Nothing else. Not a word about why he was sending it then or ever. Something else happened on the 27th, and I didn't learn about it for 2 weeks, so I'll leave it where it sat. The courthouse was replacing the fluorescent tubes in the second-floor corridor that afternoon, and the electrician kept having to move his ladder for people, and at the end of the day, he said it was busier back there than he'd expected for a Thursday. I was on that hallway until 5:30. The bridal shop has a hallway between the sales floor and the fitting rooms, with 3 plastic chairs, and the child had been in the middle chair for 3 hours. I know it was 3 hours because the woman working the floor told me, in the voice people use when they've been feeling something all afternoon and finally have somewhere to put it. She'd brought her a juice at 1. I did not go to the fitting room door. I did not announce myself. I sat down in the chair next to hers with my bag on my lap like a woman waiting on a bus. I didn't ask her anything. That's the whole trick, and it took me 14 months and a course to learn it. You don't ask a child who has stopped speaking a question, because a question is a bill, and she's been handed a bill by every adult she's met since the funeral. Are you okay? Can you say hi? Won't you talk to Grandma's friend? You just sit down and you stay there and you let the silence be something the 2 of you are doing together instead of something she's failing at. We sat. A steamer hissed. Somebody's mother laughed behind a curtain. After a while, she took my hand off my knee with both of hers and pulled it over and set it down flat on her lap. Then she wrote on the back of my hand with her finger, A-U-N. She was starting the 4th letter when my sister's voice came out over the curtain rod asking if somebody could bring the second veil and using her name. The child wiped my hand smooth with her palm, twice the way you clear a table. She'd been in that chair 3 hours and she had gotten 3 letters out. "You're the aunt, right?" A man with a Sunday rate had said that to me 18 days earlier, and on the 24th of September, a court was going to sign a piece of paper that made it not true. I sat there another minute. Then I stood up and went out through the sales floor, and I did not slam anything, and in the car I called my lawyer's cell, which she had told me not to use except for emergencies. "Book the document examiner, the good one in Columbia, pay whatever the rush is." Behind me, the fitting room curtain came back, and the hem of that dress dragged over the child's shoes. The 31st was a Monday, and it was the day the court appointed the guardian ad litem, and it was the day my lawyer finished her sentence. She had 2 things for me, she said, and she was going to say them once because they were the kind of thing clients hear wrong. First, if you ever dismiss your own petition, voluntarily, on your own motion, it goes without prejudice. That means you can file the same petition again. Dismissing is not losing. Most people don't know that. Most people think it's a door closing. Second, the guardian ad litem doesn't work for you. She works for the court and for that child, which means she doesn't stop when you stop. Once she's appointed, the only person who can end her investigation is the judge who started it. I looked out her window at the parking lot for a while. How fast can she look at an annual settlement? My lawyer put her pen down. "Faster," she said, "if somebody files one early." I didn't say anything else in that office. I thanked her and I went and taught a full afternoon of school, and on the way home I bought a garment bag zipper pull because the old one had broken on my porch, and that was the entire purchase. The document examiner works out of 2 rooms in Columbia with a light table in the second one, and she does not have a bedside manner, which by then was the only thing I wanted from another human being. She had asked me for exemplars. Not the 5 I'd attached to the motion. Those were for the court. For herself, she wanted anything I had signed in 2022, as close to June as possible, because handwriting drifts, and a person's signature in the spring of the year. Their brother died does not look like their signature 2 years later. I brought her a folder from the file box in my closet. Insurance forms, a funeral home statement with my initials on every page, and a copy of the cremation authorization I signed at the funeral home on the 15th of April 2022, at a table with a box of tissues on it, which I have kept because I keep everything, which is one of the 2 or 3 things my sister has ever said about me that was true. She put the renunciation on the light table. Then she laid the cremation authorization on top of it and slid it until the 2 signature lines came together. Come look. They matched. Not the way 2 signatures by the same hand match. 2 signatures by the same hand never match. That's the entire science. These matched the way a window matches its own reflection. Every loop, every relative height, the identical break where I lift the pen between my first and last name. And in both, at the same point in the descender of the last letter, the same tiny hesitation. A stutter in the ink where a pen skips on a soft table pad. "You didn't skip there twice," she said. "Nobody skips there twice. That's a tracing. Somebody put a light behind your signature and followed it. A pen skip." I had made that skip on the 15th of April, 2022, because the funeral home's clipboard had a foam backing and my hand was not steady, and somebody had reproduced my unsteadiness. Here is what took the floor out from under me, and it isn't the forgery. I could not go into the room where my brother was. My sister was 24 and she went in, and she came out, and she stood at the counter with the funeral director and carried the folder of paperwork out to the car. She had the paper with my hand on it because she had been the one strong enough to go in. 2 months later, somebody put a light behind it. The examiner squared the sheets and tapped their edges on the table. "I can write this up," she said. "But before I put my name on a report a courtroom will take, I need the original, not a certified copy, the paper." The 3rd of September was a Thursday, and it was the day my sister thought she won twice. The first call came at 8:15 in the morning, my lawyer, from her car. The clerk's office had gone to pull the original renunciation for inspection under our motion, and the original was not in the file jacket. Everything else was there. That sheet was not. The scan existed in the electronic record, and the certified paper copy existed in a box on my kitchen table, and the physical document with the pen pressure on it, the only thing the examiner had asked me for, was gone. There is a kind of quiet you get on a phone call when the other person is waiting for you to be upset. Then we're on schedule. I called Columbia from the parking lot. A tracing, she said, is the one finding you can make off a good scan, because what she was reading was the line and not the pressure. She would write it up on the certified copy, and she would put a paragraph in the report saying the original had been demanded and could not be produced by the court holding it. That paragraph, she said, will do more to you people than my conclusion will. At 20 to 11, I stood at the public counter on the first floor and filed a voluntary dismissal of my own petition to terminate the guardianship. Signed it, took the stamped copy. Real dismissal. Not a trick, not a stunt. The petition was gone, and my name came off the guardianship case, and the only paper of mine left anywhere in that courthouse was a motion to intervene that nobody had set for hearing. Anybody pulling that file after 11 that morning would find a woman who had made a fuss for 2 weeks and then folded. 3 things stayed exactly where they were when I signed that. A certified copy of a document that no longer physically existed, certified by that same clerk's office on the 20th of August. A guardian ad litem appointed by a judge on the 31st who does not stop when I stop. And a rule that says a dismissal like that one is without prejudice. At 3 in the afternoon, I drove to my sister's house with the garment bag over my arm and returned my mother's wedding dress to the woman who had 2 days to sell it. She opened the door already talking. Her fiancé was behind her in the hall, and my aunt was in the kitchen with 2 buckets of eucalyptus for the church, which meant there was an audience, which meant we were going to do the speech. She unzipped the bag in the doorway and pulled the skirt out into the light to check it, and gave the speech while she checked. That it was over. That I had finally gotten some help, that she hoped we could all be a family for the wedding, and that Mom would have wanted that. Then she stopped talking. She had reached the bodice. Down the back of that dress there are 26 covered buttons, silk over metal shanks, and my mother sewed every one of them on by hand in 1988 because the ready-made ones came out crooked and she was 27 and stubborn. The buttons were gone. Neat holes, thread trimmed, nothing torn. She looked up with her mouth open, and I gave her the only sentence I had prepared. They weren't part of the dress. She sewed those on after. I didn't tell her what I'd done with them. She stood in that doorway with a wedding dress in both arms and a hole where 26 buttons had been, and my aunt came out of the kitchen holding eucalyptus, and I was already at my car. The party was Thursday, and I wasn't there, so I got it the way everybody else got it, which is the way she has always preferred to be experienced. She posted 11 photographs from her own backyard, 14 relatives, a folding table, a sheet cake somebody had written on in gel. The caption on the first one was 4 words. It's over, she folded. In 4 of the 11, my brother's daughter is wearing the flower girl dress. It was a Thursday in September at 6 in the evening. She'd been made to change into it for pictures at a party celebrating the end of a lawsuit about her. Underneath, a cousin left a comment. Not a hostile one, a chatty one, the kind you leave under a photo of a kid. Something like, "No school today, lucky girl." And my sister answered it, publicly, under her own name in writing with a timestamp. She said the child was homeschooling this year while things settled down. That child was still on a 2nd grade class list at a public elementary school in Fulton, with the word pending beside her name. Nobody had withdrawn her from the district. And there was an automated truancy letter with a state seal sitting in a pile of my sister's mail since June. My aunt called me at 9 that night to make sure I'd seen how nice the cake was, and to say one more thing before she hung up, which she reported as an oddity of her day. The lawyer lady called me. Not your one, a different one, appointed by the court, she said. She asked me what year the dress was made. I said that was interesting and told her to sleep well. My sister was in a lawn chair with a paper plate on her knee, and a stranger with a subpoena power was already asking about a dress. The dealer posted on Sunday. It's a vintage shop in St. Louis, one of maybe 4 in the country, that handles couture-adjacent bridal from that era, and they post their acquisitions with a little history. My sister drove it down on the 5th, and it went out of her hands, and $9,500 was wired to her account, posting first thing Monday, on time, which meant the $2,000 a day late penalty in her consignment agreement never triggered. She made her deadline. She was very proud of it. The shop's photograph shows the dress on a form under good light. Silk Filey, 1988, hand-finished hem, and under the shoulder, in the last line of the caption, in the flat voice of a shop noting a condition issue, buttons replaced. Two things about that sale. On the 13th of August, my lawyer mailed a one-paragraph letter stating that this dress was undistributed property of an open estate, served on my sister personally, with a certificate of service on it. She sold it anyway, 23 days later, by wire, to a licensed dealer who keeps records forever. And there is only one place $9,500 goes when a person is $61,000 short with an accounting due. On Monday the 7th, she filed her annual settlement. It wasn't due. The conservatorship accounting for that period wasn't due until November, the date the court had set when it appointed her. And she filed it in September, 4 days after I dropped my petition, and the day the wire posted, and she filed it under oath. I understood immediately why she did it, and so will you. An accounting that's been filed and approved is a closed door. She wanted the year sealed before anybody with a court appointment got curious about the year. In it, childcare expenses for a summer in which the child was at 3 photo sessions and a fitting, $4,100 of children's clothing, and a new line, $9,500, entered as money coming in, a reimbursement from the estate, which is not what it was, and which put in writing, in a court document, on a signature line above the words, penalty of perjury, that she had sold something and knew where the money came from. I did not do one thing that week. I graded reading assessments and I took a casserole to a colleague whose father had a stroke. She had 2 months, she used 4 days. The guardian ad litem asked to meet me at a coffee place on Court Street on the 8th, and she opened by making sure I understood what she was. I don't represent you. I'm not your advocate and I'm not your enemy. If I conclude you're a destabilizing presence in that child's life, I'll write that, and it will be worse for you than anything your sister has ever said. Fine. She had a folder. She had gotten 2 things herself, on her own authority, in 8 days. The school attendance record under subpoena, and the annuity statements from the trustee. 9 absences, 6 between February and May of last school year, 3 since the 18th of August. She turned the record around so I could read it, and I put my hands flat on the table and did not touch it, and I could see her file that away. She asked one question about the photographs, whether the timestamps were original to the camera. I gave her the photographer's name, his number, and the business card with $40 written on the back in his handwriting and the date under it. I did not tell her what I thought the pictures showed. She hadn't asked me that, and the fastest way to lose a woman like that is to answer a question she didn't ask. She wrote for a while. All right, she said. I'm going to ask you one thing that has nothing to do with money. He caught me in the church parking lot on the 9th. The parish hall runs the district's free school supply night, and I had 2 boxes of composition books in my trunk, which tells you how frightened he was, because a man who lives 2 doors from your mother for 11 years has your phone number. 49 years old, in a good coat on a warm evening, standing between me and my car. Can I have 5 minutes, off the record, just you and me? No. I said it kindly, and I said it once. Anything he wanted to tell me could be told with my attorney on the phone or in her office, and I'd sit for either one that night if he wanted. And it was the no that broke him open. He'd come with a version he'd rehearsed, and the rehearsal needed me to be a woman he could talk to in a parking lot, and when she didn't show up it came out of him sideways. I never watched anybody sign it. The lot was full. People were carrying folding chairs. She brought it to me finished. Your mother's girl standing in my doorway on a Saturday crying. Her brother was 10 weeks in the ground. She said her sister wouldn't come to the phone. He put his hand on the roof of the car next to us. I notarized my own neighbor's daughter, Upton. I've done it for that family for 11 years. I didn't read it. I read the caption on the front page and I signed the line. He kept going. The bells started for the 6 o'clock, and he was still talking when they came in over the top of him, and I watched his mouth move through the end of a sentence nobody will ever hear. On the 10th, the court went looking for a document it could not find, and when a court cannot find something, it does not call a family. It audits itself. I was not in the room. My lawyer and the court administrator were behind a door, and I sat on a bench in the second-floor corridor with my hands in my lap, because I am a party in a case, and I am also a member of the public, and the public sits in the hall. She came out in 20 minutes and sat down next to me and told me it in the order they'd found it. The paper file had been checked out to the records room. The electronic access log had a badge swipe on it. The 27th of August, 4:51 in the afternoon. 21 seconds inside the records room, which is not long enough to file anything and is exactly long enough to open a jacket, take out one sheet and walk. And the corridor camera, because the second floor has one over the elevators, which she would have known about for 10 years and stopped seeing for 9. The 27th of August. The same afternoon, a child sat in a plastic chair in a bridal shop for 3 hours and got 3 letters written on the back of my hand before somebody called her name. She badges through the back door at 10 to 8 every morning. I said that at the very beginning of this, when I still thought the hard part would be finding the paper. Everything up to that afternoon was a family fight over a guardianship. What was on that log was not a family fight. Tampering with a court record in an open case is not a thing. A judge weighs against your side of the story. She did that in a building where she has worked for 10 years, because we had asked, politely in writing, to look at one piece of paper. Her fiancé came to my porch on the 11th, and he had been interviewed by the guardian ad litem for the first time that morning, and he stood exactly where he'd stood with the garment bag. He asked what was going to happen. I want to be precise, because it's the whole man in one sentence. He did not ask what was going to happen to the child. He did not ask what was going to happen to my sister. He said, I need to know how much of this lands on me. So I told him one true thing, since he'd driven over for it. In this state, a high school teacher is a mandated reporter. Not a good neighbor, not a concerned adult, a person with a legal duty and a timeline. He had watched a 7-year-old asleep in a bridal shop in May and said something to himself, and had then said it to himself all summer, and had told exactly one person in August, on a porch, while handing her a dress he wanted out of his house. His school was going to learn about it, and not from me. He looked at his shoes for a while. There's a payment on the venue that I need to ask you about. I shut the door before he finished it. Through the wood I heard him say the number, and it was $14,000, and I already knew whose $14,000 it was. On the 12th I made the phone call I have taken the most criticism for, from the 2 people I told about it. I called the man from the church parking lot with my own attorney on the line, and I gave him 6 days. My lawyer files with the disciplinary council Friday morning. Everything goes. The renunciation, the examiner's report, your signature on the witness line. That's 6 days and it's not a negotiation, and there's nothing you can offer me for it. He started to say my name. You have until Friday to walk in there yourself. That's all I called to say. I did not tell him it would help him. It did help him, and I knew it would, and I want to be honest that knowing it is not the same as offering it. I made him no promise. I asked him for nothing, not an affidavit, not a statement, not a word about my sister. If he chose to go in on his own, that was his to choose, and if he chose to sit still for 6 days, the same envelope arrived either way. He asked me why I would do that for him. I'm not doing it for you. I'm filing on Friday. You have until Friday. Sunday the 13th was the last full day my sister spent believing she had won, and she used it the way she has used every good day of her life. At 10 in the morning, she sent me a photograph of my brother's daughter in the flower girl dress, standing on a chair in front of a mirror, and under it, 11 days. You're welcome to come, but I think we both know how that would go. 11 days, the 24th. At 2 in the afternoon, she sent a scan of a consent form and asked me to sign it and drop it at her office. It was the estate. 14 months of not picking up a pen, and now that she needed the house sold before a wedding, she wanted my signature in the same week she wanted me nowhere. And at 4:40, she did the thing I could not have made her do with a year of planning. The county deputy came to my door on Tuesday with the paper, but she filed it Sunday through the after-hours drop, which I know because the file stamp says so. A petition for an order of protection against me. Harassment. Naming me. Sworn, signed, filed. In it she described a woman who had followed her to a bridal shop, come to her home uninvited, and been observed watching her house. The bridal shop is a business open to the public, and I sat in a chair in the hallway. Her home is where I returned a dress she asked for, in daylight, in front of 3 witnesses. Watching her house is a woman running the water at her dead mother's place every other Sunday, which my sister has known about for 14 months because the reason it needs doing is that she won't sign. She put all of that in front of a judge, under oath, with her name at the bottom. I didn't answer. I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea going cold. She swore to a judge twice in 1 week. I only needed her to do it once. Monday, the 14th of September. I took a personal day, and by 11 in the morning it was finished, and nobody watched me do it. People imagined something with a courtroom in it. It was a strip mall lawyer, a public counter, and a post office. 2 hours, $190 in filing fees, and the loudest thing that happened was a date stamp. 7 things were on the table that morning. 6 of them went in. The certified copy of the renunciation, sealed by the Callaway County Clerk's office on the 20th of August. A document the court could no longer produce in original, certified 7 days before somebody spent 21 seconds in the records room. The examiner's report. 9 pages, photographs, the 2 signature lines superimposed, and 1 sentence in the conclusion that does not use the word forgery because a professional doesn't need to. The questioned signature is not a freehand writing, but a reproduction of the exemplar dated the 15th of April, 2022. The court's own access log, and the corridor camera still, and a request that the record be preserved. The annual settlement she had sworn to on the 7th, laid line by line against the trustee's annuity statements. $61,000 out of a dead man's arithmetic, and 9,500 more entered as something it was not. A letter to a vintage dealer in St. Louis, stating that the item consigned on the 5th of September was undistributed property of an open estate, with a copy of the notice served on the seller in August enclosed, and my petition, refiled. Same petition, same relief, new date. Because a voluntary dismissal is without prejudice. And 11 days earlier, I had folded in front of a counter clerk and gone home. The 7th envelope did not go in that day. It sat in my lawyer's out tray, addressed to the Office of Chief Disciplinary Counsel, with a note on it that said Friday. At the counter, the clerk ran everything through the date stamp, 1 sheet at a time, and I stood there with the $12 receipt out of my wallet where it had been since the 13th of August, checking the case number against the copies one last time. Behind me, down the hall, the door to the employee lot opened and closed, and a badge reader beeped, the way it does at 10 to 8 every morning of the world. That week, the world stopped being a place my sister could talk her way across. Tuesday afternoon, the probate judge froze the conservatorship account and suspended every unapproved disbursement pending an accounting hearing, which in plain English means nothing moves, nothing gets paid, and the person holding the money now has to explain each line to a man in a robe. Wednesday, the settlement went to a place that does not have a family in it. A sworn filing with numbers that don't match the trustee's records is not a probate dispute anymore, and the judge did what judges do, which is send it sideways to people whose job is only that. And Wednesday afternoon, my sister was placed on administrative leave from the office of the circuit clerk. 10 years. They walked her to the parking lot and took her badge, which is the part I keep coming back to at 2 in the morning. She used a badge to take a piece of paper out of a file. They took the badge. Nobody called me to tell me. I learned it from my lawyer, who learned it from the court administrator on a call about something else, and he added 1 sentence at the end of it that neither of us understood for another 3 weeks. There's a second question about her position that isn't ours to answer. Thursday the 17th, a day before the deadline I'd given him, the man from the church parking lot walked into his own attorney's office and self-reported. He asked us to be there. My lawyer went because she was curious. I went because I wanted to be able to say I looked at him. He had prepared an affidavit and he read it out loud, which nobody made him do. He had not witnessed anyone sign the renunciation. It had been presented to him complete. He had notarized it at his kitchen table on a Saturday, out of 11 years of neighborly habit and 10 weeks of a family's grief, and he had violated the one duty that makes a notary worth anything, which is that you watch the hand. That affidavit is the reason none of this could be argued away later. A certified copy proves what the paper said. An examiner proves the ink was traced. Only he could prove there was no room in the world where I sat down and signed. He didn't ask me to forgive him. I'll give him that. He asked one thing, and he asked it looking at his own hands. I have a daughter in her last year at Mizzou. I'd like to still be able to pay for that. I did not say it was all right because it wasn't, and I did not say I hoped he lost everything because I didn't. I nodded once. Then on the way out, I stopped in the door. Tell them the part about her crying. That part's true. The guardian ad litem did her home visit on the 18th, and I was allowed to be present for 20 minutes, which was not a courtesy. It was in her order. There was a trauma clinician with her, a woman with a canvas bag of paper and markers who sat on the floor and did not once ask the child a question with a yes in it. The house was clean. There were flowers on the counter from the party. She inventoried the room. She opened the closet and started counting hangers out loud for her notes. I knew every item on that rod. The corduroy jumper with the ladybug pocket. A Saturday in Colombia, my mother saying she'd pay and me saying I'd pay, and both of us paying half. The cardigan with the horses. The navy church dress from the outlet mall in Osage Beach. The red winter coat, bought in a January when she was 5, a size big on purpose, because my mother was a woman who thought ahead, because she had 5 months to live and did not know it. Every hanger in that closet was something a dead woman bought. The clinician read the sizes off the labels for the record. 5s mostly. A 6 in the coat. She turned 7 in May. 19 items. Not one of them bought in the last 2 years. And in a court file 2 floors above that room, there was a document sworn under penalty of perjury that said $4,100, children's clothing. The guardian ad litem asked her, carefully, in the flat voice she uses for everything, whether she wanted to keep living in this house. She shook her head, once, slow. Then she walked past all 3 of us to the closet, and she pulled the door open wider. Not to show us anything in particular, just wider. As far as it would go, and then she held it there with her hand flat on the edge of it while the clinician wrote. She didn't make a sound, she just opened it more. The guardian ad litem capped her pen, and that was the only noise in the room. On the way out, she asked me the thing she'd saved from the coffee shop, whether, if the court gave me the child and gave my sister nothing, I would still let the 2 of them be in a room together. I said yes. She wrote for a long time after that. On the 21st, the clerk with the beagle on her monitor was walked out of the civil records system. Her access was revoked, she was reduced in grade, and she gave a statement, and my lawyer read it to me over the phone. 2 sentences. She told me it was a duplicate. She's a clerk. I scanned it. I have turned that over more times than is good for me. There is no villain in that sentence. There's a woman at a counter at the end of a Monday, with a colleague she's known for years standing there holding a piece of paper, saying it's just a copy, and the choice in front of her is between 30 seconds and a conversation. That is what took 4 years of my life. A notary who didn't look up. A clerk who saved 30 seconds. A mother who was too ashamed to make a phone call. Not one of them woke up meaning to do a thing to me. Only one person in that chain meant it. She just needed the other 3 to be tired. She came to my house on Monday the 21st at 20 to 10 at night, alone, sober, and she had a piece of paper folded in her coat pocket that she'd already typed. It was a letter of leniency, addressed to the court, describing me as a family member who supports a resolution that keeps the child in a stable placement, with a line at the bottom for my signature. She stood on my steps and talked for a long time. She said I'd always been jealous. She said I'd waited 4 years for a way to hurt her. She said Mom would be ashamed. She said the word therapy twice. And then she got to the one she'd driven over for, the one she has always been able to close a room with. You are doing this to a 7-year-old. You understand that? Whatever happens to me happens to her. I let that sit in the yard for a second. Then I said the only thing I have said directly to my sister since I handed her that dress, and I said it once, and I did not give her a place to put an answer. When you were 24, you were the one who went in and identified our brother. I couldn't. You could. I know that. That happened. She started to nod. It just doesn't cover what you charged that child for it. She asked me to sign the letter. No, she asked me. And this is the one I think about. Whether she could still pick her up from the school gate on Fridays, because the gate is public and nobody could stop her. No. I closed my door. I never raised my voice, and I want that on the record, because in my family, whoever raises their voice loses the next 10 years. By Tuesday the 22nd, there was no wedding to have. The dealer in St. Louis wrote first, and dealers write beautifully when they're angry. The consignment was rescinded for defective title. The $9,500 was demanded back within 10 days. plus 2,000 in restoration and handling, because they had already begun conservation work on a garment they now could not sell. Her fiancé canceled the wedding on the same day, by group text, to 80 people. And here is what he found out in the week that followed, which no one had explained to him and which he had never thought to ask. The $14,000 deposit at the venue had been paid out of the child's conservatorship account and described in a sworn filing as a family event reservation. When the court ordered that money restored, it came back out of the venue's hands, and the person who signed that contract alongside her, with his own name on the second line, because he was the responsible one, because he taught school and had good credit, had owed it $14,000 for a party that did not happen, on a contract he signed to be helpful. He moved out of the apartment they'd leased together in June. 8 months left on it, both names on the door, one name still paying. The dealer's letter ended with a line I read 4 times standing at my mailbox because it was the only sentence in that whole month written by someone who had no idea what any of it meant. Please advise where the original buttons are. The 24th of September was supposed to be the day it ended forever, and my sister had been right about that, and she was the only one in the room who didn't know it yet. That hearing had been on the calendar since June as the finalization of an adoption. There is a way those go. They are the good afternoon in a probate judge's week. People bring cameras. The judge comes down off the bench for a picture. 11 relatives sat in the gallery. The same 11. My aunt in the second row with her purse on her knees, and the 2 cousins who had been on that lawn with plastic cups, and the great-uncle who told me at my mother's funeral that families forgive. They had come to watch a little girl get a new last name. The Guardian ad litem's report had been filed on the 22nd. 52 pages with exhibits, and I have never read all of it, and I never will. The judge did not raise his voice either. That's the thing about the rooms where it actually happens. He read a case number and a date. He took my motion to intervene up first and granted it in 1 sentence, which is how I was sitting there at all. He noted the report and the pendency of a criminal referral. He found that the interests of the minor could not be evaluated on the record as it stood, and he stayed the adoption proceeding. No gasp, no shouting. My sister's new attorney, she'd hired a second one that week, said, "Understood, Your Honor," and wrote something down. My aunt stood up before the judge was finished, because she thought that was the end, and the folding seat came up behind her and banged into the back of the seat in front, and every person in that room turned around and looked at her. The judge wasn't finished. There is a distinction in this state that my sister had been counting on for 4 years, and I only learned it that afternoon, sitting on a wooden bench with my hands folded. Guardian of the person is one thing. Conservator of the estate is another. I terminated the guardianship from the bench. That part happened in about 40 seconds. The appointment was terminated. Temporary custody of the minor was placed with me pending home study. On a transition, the guardian ad litem was to schedule inside of 10 days, and the guardian ad litem's role continued. Then he came to the money, and he did not terminate anything. Because a conservator does not get to hand back the keys and walk away. A conservator has to account every dollar in and out every year with receipts, in a separate proceeding with her own name at the top of it. She could not resign her way out of it, and nobody could settle it for her. He set that hearing. And he said the sentence that changed the shape of her next 2 years, addressed not to her and not to her lawyer, but to his own clerk, in the mild administrative voice of a man moving a file. "And forward the file, not to our office." She had worked in that building for 10 years. She knew the sound of every door in it. And the first institution in the world to turn its back on my sister was the one she badged into every morning at 10 to 8. 2 days later, the examiner's office sent a fax, and there was a page in it I had not paid for. The report itself was finished and signed. Behind it was an addendum, 1 paragraph, marked preliminary, photographing my mother's nomination under oblique light. A lamp raked almost flat across the paper, which is how you bring up pen pressure. She had picked up something on the reverse of the sheet that has nothing to do with signatures. Pencil, erased, and under the erasure, the impressions of a second block of writing, pressed harder, made later. She wanted a day with it and a better light. The other thing came the same afternoon, from the notary side, while I was standing in my lawyer's doorway with my coat on. That sign-and-go notary keeps a journal, because in this state a notary must, and the journal for the 12th of March 2025 shows my mother's name, her signature, and the time. It shows it twice, 40 minutes apart. She had come in, done something, left, and come back. I asked what the second one was for. My lawyer put her hand over the receiver and told me the examiner was on the other line and wanted to say one thing before she hung up. "There's a date written on the back," she said, "and it isn't the date she notarized it." The reconstruction came through the next evening, and I printed it poster size at the copy shop on Business 54 because at 11 inches it was still just gray on gray, and I laid it on my kitchen table under the light. My mother's handwriting, the late version, the one that leans and loses the line at the end of a word. Pencil, pressed hard, on the back of the sheet she had just had notarized, in a car or on a countertop 40 minutes before she went back in. April 2024. I asked the courthouse for a copy of the guardianship so I could enroll her in school. The paper that came back had my oldest daughter's name on it, saying no. I did not ask her. I was too ashamed to ask her. April of 2024. She died in June of last year. From April of 2024 to the day we buried her is 14 months, and if that number sounds familiar, it is because it is the exact length of time my brother's daughter has not spoken. My mother knew for the last 14 months of her life. It is the worst thing in this story, and it is not a crime. She read a piece of paper that said her oldest child had been asked and had said no, and instead of picking up the phone, 30 seconds, the same 30 seconds the clerk saved, she was ashamed. Ashamed of me first. Then, when she understood what her other daughter was, ashamed of herself. And by then she had spent a year being cold to me at Christmas and could not think how to undo it. So she waited. Until March of 2025, when a doctor in Colombia gave her a number, and she drove to a strip mall and wrote it out and had a stranger stamp it, and then sat in the parking lot and turned it over and wrote on the back what she could not say to my face, and went in a second time to have that one witnessed too. 11 days later she went into the hospital. She came home once for a weekend in April, and she did not mail it, and she did not file it, and she did not put it in the bank box, and I know exactly why. And it is the only decision she made in that entire 14 months that I would defend to anyone. To file a paper in a guardianship in Callaway County, it goes through the clerk's office. Her youngest daughter works at that counter, so she sewed it into the lining of her wedding dress, in the closet, in the house, in the small stitch she used on hems for 30 years, and left it where the only person who would ever open a 38-year-old seam was a woman who keeps everything. Mom knew that. That's why she left it where it would sit. My sister said that on a lawn in August with 11 people listening, and she was right. And she did not know one single thing about what she was right about. There was one more line at the bottom of the reconstruction. I could see it was there. I could see it was short. I folded the page in half at the line above it, and I sat in my kitchen with my hands flat on the table for a long time, and I am not going to pretend that was strength. I was 30 years old, and I could not read the last sentence my mother wrote about me. The paper slid off the edge of the table and landed face down on the floor, and I left it there until morning. The same way a wedding invitation stayed face down on my aunt's kitchen linoleum in August, and neither of us ever picked that one up either. She came to live with me on the 2nd of October, under a temporary order, with a garbage bag of clothes that didn't fit her, and a folder of schoolwork. And on the 5th of October, at my kitchen table, she handed me a piece of paper. I had seen versions of it for a year. In her backpack, in her folder. Always the same drawing, done over and over the way children redraw the one thing they are working on. A house. 4 people out front in a row, holding hands, all 4 the same size, the way kids draw people before somebody teaches them perspective. She put it down in front of me and pointed at the 4th one. I had always assumed the 4th was my brother. It wasn't. My brother is the tall one on the end with the round glasses she has been drawing since she was 4. The 4th one was my sister. Then she took the pencil back, and in the margin, in the careful, oversized letters of a 2nd grader, she wrote, "She still gets to be drawn." I sat there. And then she wrote a second line, underneath, and pushed the paper an inch closer to me, which is how she asks for things. "Then you pay her rent for 2 months so she doesn't have to sleep in the car." Nobody told her that. My sister had lost her job, and the landlord had put a notice on the door, and my aunt had said so on the phone in a kitchen, at a normal volume, 6 feet from a child who does not speak. For 14 months, every adult in my family had said everything in front of her. Silence made them forget she was still receiving. She heard all of it. Every version of the story where I was the aunt who said no, every phone call about money, and then, at the end, the ones about a woman who might have to sleep in a car. And what she did with all of that was draw 4 people and ask me not to remove one. I had spent 2 months building something carefully, legally, on schedule, and the person it was all for had already decided something I had not thought to consider. I didn't look at her when I answered. I looked at the paper, because I could not have gotten it out otherwise. Okay, 2 months. The 8th of October was a Thursday, and it took 25 minutes. The court granted the petition and appointed me guardian of the person of my brother's daughter. The annuity was locked under the supervision of the court with a corporate trustee and a bond, and my sister was ordered to restore $61,000 plus interest, plus the guardian ad litem's fees, on a schedule. The criminal file had already gone where it was going. 2 investigators sat in the back row with their coats on and did not say a word. And her employment status resolved itself in one line. The one the court administrator had been too decent to say out loud in September. A person who has tampered with a court record does not work in the court system of this state again. Not in this county, not in any of the 114. Then the guardian ad litem stood up and asked to supplement the record with an exhibit, and the judge said, "Go ahead." And I did not know what was coming because nobody had told me, because she does not work for me and never did. She had the examiner's addendum, all of it, including the last line. The judge put on his glasses. He read the whole thing into the record, flat and unhurried, giving no weight to any word over any other, in a room with 11 relatives sitting behind me, in the same order they had stood on that lawn. He read April 2024. He read I did not ask her. I was too ashamed to ask her. And then he read the line I had folded the paper in half to avoid. I was wrong, my oldest never said no. I did not cry when I found the forgery. I did not cry at the light table in Columbia, or in the bridal shop hallway with 3 letters on the back of my hand, or on my own steps with my sister 18 inches from my face. I cried in a courtroom because a man I have never met read one line aloud. That's the whole thing, if you want it. 4 years I was not asking anybody to punish my sister. I was asking somebody to say out loud, in front of the people who had believed the other version, that it was not true. It took a stranger in a robe 11 seconds. That will be part of the record, he said, and passed it down to his clerk. Permanently. Outside, the courthouse steps are limestone, and there were 8 or 9 of us coming down them. And my sister was standing off to the side by the handrail waiting for her attorney, crying the way she cries, with her whole face, in public. My brother's daughter let go of my hand. She walked 4 steps across that landing, and she stopped in front of my sister, and she said the first words she has said out loud since the 9th of June of last year. "Stop crying, I know the way home now." My sister sat down on the step, not gracefully, not for effect. Her legs went, and she sat down on cold limestone in front of her aunt and 2 cousins and a woman from her old office who had come out for a cigarette, and she put both hands over her mouth. And nobody helped her up. It looked cruel, and it wasn't. Every person on those steps had spent 4 years knowing exactly what they were to my sister, her allies, her audience. And in one afternoon none of them knew anymore. They didn't refuse. They did not know if they were allowed. And it wasn't a punishment. It was a 7-year-old telling her she didn't need her and forgiving her in the same breath. And that is the only thing on this earth that could have done it. I did not say anything. I did not touch my sister. I stood at the bottom of the steps and I waited. After a while the child came back down and took my hand. And then she walked in front. She has never done that. 14 months of standing slightly behind whoever was moving, and she went out ahead of me across that parking lot, pulling my arms straight, and I had to lengthen my stride to keep up with her. It's March now, and I'll tell you where everybody landed, because you've stayed this long and that's the part people want. My sister is 29. She was charged with 3 counts: forgery, tampering with physical evidence, and felony stealing of $25,000 or more, and pled to 2. She has no history, and she is not in prison. She is on probation with restitution, which is how it goes in this state. She is paying back $61,000 in interest and the guardian ad litem's fees at a rate that will take her most of her 30s. She will never again hold a position in the Missouri court system, and she was very good at that job, and it was the only thing she had ever been proud of. She sees her niece once a month, supervised, in a room with a window in the door. I drive her there. I sit in the car. The man from the church parking lot was suspended by the Supreme Court of this state for 3 years, less than the guideline, because he self-reported before any complaint was filed. He lost the county appointments that were half his practice. He testified twice, and both times he said what he said in his kitchen, and the second time his voice went. His daughter graduated in May. I checked once, and then I stopped checking. There's a fourth person, and I've been putting him off. The clerk with the beagle on her monitor was disciplined and demoted, and permanently barred from the civil records system. She still works in that courthouse. She's at the passport window now, and when I go in there I say hello and she says hello, and neither of us has ever mentioned it, and I think we both understand that 30 seconds is going to be in that room with us for the rest of our working lives. My sister's fiancé is not my sister's fiancé. He paid the $14,000 because he signed it. He was interviewed twice. He made a very late report to his own principal, which is on his professional record permanently. The word they use is delayed, and it will be the first thing on the screen every time he applies anywhere. He has 2 months left on a lease with 2 names on it. And in November I paid 2 months of my sister's rent. One time. Through the landlord, in a cashier's check, with a note asking that the source not be disclosed. He assumed it was a church fund and told her so, and to this day, she believes that a church in Fulton she has never attended covered her November and December. I didn't do it for her. She knows that, because she doesn't know it happened. She's in 2nd grade, and she's caught all 9 days up, and she reads a grade above where she's supposed to. She has speech therapy twice a week with a woman I would have chosen myself if anyone had asked me, and there are still days when she decides not to talk. Whole Saturdays sometimes. And nobody in my house makes her. That's the rule, and it's the only rule I've hung a sign on. She has a winter coat that fits. I had it made. The coat was off a rack in Columbia, but I took it to a woman on 4th Street with a shoebox. And down the front of that coat, in 2 rows, are 26 silk-covered buttons that my mother sewed by hand in 1988, and that I cut off a wedding dress on a Wednesday night in September with a seam ripper and a good light. I don't have the dress. I never tried to get it back. It's in a shop in St. Louis with new buttons on it, and I hope some girl gets married in it. The buttons went to the child who held that train for 40 minutes. In February, her teacher had them write down what they want to be, and she brought hers home to show me before she turned it in. And it says she wants to be the lady at the counter who gives people their papers. I asked her why that one. Because they have to give it to you if you ask. I did not correct a single word of that. She'll find out. In June, we're going to drive to Jefferson City and see the Capitol, because she asked, and because I said yes before she finished the sentence. The estate closed at the end of March, in my mother's backyard, at the table on the porch. 3 signatures. I signed mine. Then I signed the second one. On the line for the person who accepts my brother's daughter's share of this house. Not the annuity, which sits with a corporate trustee and a bond and is not mine to touch, but the house, the furniture, the tree. That is who I am now, in writing, on file. My sister signed the third in an office in town with her attorney and a witness, and I was not there, and I did not want to be. 14 months of a house sitting full of a dead woman's furniture waiting for a pen. The peach tree came out that week. My mother planted it the spring my brother was born, and it is 33 years old, and it still fruits, badly, in a good year. The sump pump ran 1 cycle while we sat there and shut itself off. I don't have to drive out every other Sunday anymore to run the water in an empty house. It isn't an empty house, it's hers, and we're moving in over the summer, into the room at the back that gets the morning. She had her feet up on the second chair, and she looked at the tree for a while, and then she asked me the second thing she has ever said to me, and it was so ordinary that I had to put my cup down. She asked what month the peaches come. I told her August. She said okay, and we sat there, and that was the whole afternoon, and there was nothing left in it that needed anything from anybody. So, that's it, that's the 4 years. If there's one thing worth carrying out of it, it isn't the forgery and it isn't the courtroom. The most expensive thing anyone took from me was not my brother's daughter, and it was not the money. It was that in 4 years, out of a family of 11 people on a lawn, Not one of them ever asked me a question. They read a piece of paper and filled in the rest, and my own mother did the same, and she died of being too ashamed to make one phone call. The only person who ever asked me anything was a 7-year-old who couldn't talk, and she did it with 3 letters on the back of my hand. So I'll ask you, since nobody asked me, if you've ever been the villain in a story you weren't allowed to speak in, how long did you stay quiet, and what finally made you stop? And I asked you at the very beginning whether I should have crossed that lawn. I've told you everything now and I still don't know. Tell me in the comments. I read them. Thank you for staying with this one to the end. There's another story coming, and I hope you'll be here for it.